Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of DS9 in the order they are broadcast. Tonight's episode is Empok Nor, and this is Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Blair from Ontario, Canada.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. I sound a little bit quieter this week, but I am recording this from inside a study room at my law school's library, so I didn't want to miss another week with these guys, and I certainly didn't want to miss the one slasher episode of DS9. So here I am to talk about Empok Nor. Synopsis. What? Yes. Who was going to? Someone going to speak?
I was just going to say, I knew you would come on this episode, no matter what. What sort of natural disaster would have to befall you to not make the slasher episode?
Normally that would be true, but I mean, like, I've missed plenty of episodes that I love in this season already, so I don't know. But you're right. If I would come back, it would be for an episode like this. So let's get into it. Synopsis. Halloween thrills and creeps in this haunted space station episode. Chris is not here with us, but you could tell that these are his notes. This is the 24th episode of Season 5 and 120th overall. It first aired on May 19th, 1997. Teleplay by Hans Beimler. Story by, no surprise, Brian Fuller. This has his fingerprints all over it. And it was directed by Mike Vijar. Guest stars include Tom Hodges as Pachetti, Andy Milder as Bakhta, Margine Holden as Stoltzoff, Jeffrey King as Amaro, and Chester E. Tripp as Stuntman Extraordinaire. So in lieu of Chris, Blair has volunteered graciously to read these notes. So Blair, take us into Empok Nor.
Thanks, Matt. Teaser. Quarks is empty because it sits below a plasma manifold. The chief realizes they need a new one, and they can't replicate it. So they decide to go on to a mission to an old abandoned Cardassian space station. So a team is assembled to scavenge manifolds from Empok Nor, which is identical in design to DS9. Because it is standard for Cardassians to plant booby traps whenever they abandon an area, Sisko recruits an outside resource to join the mission as the minesweeper, Elam Garak. The rest of the crew comprises O'Brien, Nog, and 4 other Starfleet crew members, as named above, and might we point out, engineers.
Yeah,
opening credits.
And security officers. Stoltzoff and Amaro are security.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, we shouldn't learn their names. They're victim 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, it's cannon fodder, and just because this is Star Trek, they're not a bunch of sexy teens, going on this, vacation to the lakeside or something.
Yeah, but I do like how, we know that they're the ones that are going to die, if anything, because their names are not in the opening credits, but they do kind of I can see Fuller kind of playing homage to sort of those slasher tropes, and they're not horny teens, but they give each of them kind of a, those slasher archetypes, Matt. Like, there's the guy who's too distracted with his own thing, and there's the wuss, and then there's the 2 jock type people, I guess, that they would fit into with the security officers.
Yeah, it's the thinnest of characterization for each one of these people, which I don't think is all that big of a deal, because this is very quickly apparent what type of episode this is going to be for the most part.
And the reason it's not a big deal to me is because I love slasher movies, and this is any slasher movie. You get maybe 2 or 3 developed characters, and the rest are just archetypes, which is fine.
And I like the fact that they bring up the point that we have some engineers here who, hey, we get to carry phasers, which I kind of like. It just doesn't show that all Starfleet members are equally trained. I like the fact that these are engineers. They have very little time or necessity to carry phasers, and it was good. And I love the fact that good old Nog gets to come on the trip, and he's just he acts like a keen cadet. Just yes sir, no sir. He's got his back. He's the only guy that carries a backpack. You know, I complain all the time when they go on away missions that should they ever be stranded, they have no equipment with them. Nog actually had a backpack potentially with stuff should they be stranded for a period of time. So I like that they brought him on the trip as well.
Well, then he must not have taken it later. So
Well, I thought he still had it in the whole episode, did he not?
I'm
I don't
pretty
know.
sure he did because I can picture him like playing around, playing soldier in the cargo bay, jumping around, and I think he had it on his back at that point.
He did have it there.
Okay,
Yes.
so he packed everything except a portable comm relay. Nice going.
It was on the ship.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out, because I can't imagine we're going to talk about these 4 extra characters any length of time past this intro other than just bringing up when they're all picked off. Aside from the fact that the Stoltzov, I have to always drop in the Babylon 5 stuff. She was like a primary character in Babylon 5 spin-off series. Crusade, just a little thing. But the point I wanted to make is I think it is kind of important for them to not have fully developed characters in this story, because like the temptation might be to turn the convention on its head and make them interesting and rounded. But since we're going to have one of our main characters kill one of them with no repercussions, I don't think they want us to think about these 4 victims for any length of time, because they don't want us to think about Garrick in any real negative way for any real length of time.
I can see that to a certain extent. That's probably true. I also think, too, that, this is Brian Fuller, who I know knows the genre inside and out. And so I think he's just writing it as an homage to those kind of films.
It's an homage, but we've kind of had similar ones, not even too far distant in this season. So it would be kind of fun to see them turn it on its ear a little bit. And I think they do to an extent, but I think they could. This will be one of my general criticisms of this episode, is I think there was room for them to kind of explore a little bit off from the beaten path, and they don't really do that in this episode. You know exactly what it is at the beginning, and it doesn't stray too far from that.
They don't, but what I get most of my general kicks out of this episode, aside from the homages, is that it's very well made. I think that the Mike Vijar, I think, was the director, and this episode's lit perfectly. I think it still works as like you could watch this episode around Halloween time, like we're doing now, and I think it still works.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it many times on any episode where they flash back to Empok Nor or whenever we're going to see Empok Nor. It's just the set design is so evocative just by itself. Turn out half the lights, throw some garbage on the promenade, turn the camera at a slight angle, and all of a sudden it looks really compelling and really interesting. And they do that throughout this. It's tons of like tight camera work, so you're feeling claustrophobic and alone through it. So yeah, technical wise, a lot of it's quite good in this episode.
Yeah, and like you said, the DS9 promenade set is just made for scares like that. It has so many twists and turns and blind corners. You don't know what's coming around certain bends, and
a lot of shadows, just natural shadows.
Yeah, even the corridors too. I mean, they're not the clean, sleek Starfleet corridors. They have a little bit more organic quality to it, not quite to Aliens, but it's not that far from it. So it's in easy mode when you have a Halloween episode on Deep Space Nine.
Very much so. But I mean, I may try to see how effective this episode is, like on a big screen TV at night with the lights turned off.
And you mentioned character development or lack thereof. Is it just me, or once again we get the Bolian who is always paranoid, afraid? We see that in every single Bolian we've seen on Voyager and in Deep Space Nine, the earlier one on the season finale there. But
if we've learned much from Star Trek, if you're a species, you have one defining characteristic, and everyone in it's characterized the exact same way. I mean, all too often. So yeah, I mean, it stands to reason.
Okay, well, let's get into the story then. So we come back from the credits where we find Nog and Garrick playing a Cardassian board game to pass the time. And this will bring us to our first clip.
What are you doing? Regrouping, but you're losing. That's why I need to protect my assets.
Can you turn it up a little bit?
Protecting your assets is what got you into trouble in the first place. You have to go on the offensive. You have to attack. Yo, but this is maddening. Asking a Ferengi to play a Cardassian game is like asking a Klingon to chew with his mouth closed. Kotra is not about regrouping or hoarding assets. It's about bold strategy and decisive action. Chief, would you like to take on the winner? I'd love to play Kotra against the hero of Setlik 3. What is that supposed to mean? Oh, we all know your distinguished war record. How you led 24 men against the Barika encampment and took out an entire regiment of Cardassians. If you play Kotra with half that brazenness, we'd have quite a match. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm an engineer. I see. So when you and Dr. Bashir go into the holosuites for hours at a time, you're just repairing them? What's your point, Garrick? No, I'm just curious. Why do you and Dr. Bashir spend hours in the holosuites dressed as fighter pilots, reliving ancient battles? We do it for fun. It's a game. So is Kotra. And I'd love nothing more than to play against a man like you. Maybe some other time.
So, Garrick, is he either the best person to go on a road trip with, or is he the biggest pain in the ass to go on a road trip with? Because we've now seen this a couple times where his road trip game is just trying to get on the nerves of whoever's driving the ship. Right? I mean, that's what he does.
I think he'd be fun to go on a road trip if you're interacting with other people and he's trolling other people you meet on the road trip. I'm not so sure I'd want to be the one sitting in that RV and him just going from person to person. But he'd be a great guy if you're out in a bar or something and he just trolling everybody else in the room. You would find that very amusing.
But man, I don't know how much we want to get into it because this will be the back half of the episode. But man, that conversation he has is kind of troubling for the overall arc of the story, because it's showing you well before he's exposed to this drug that we see that the themes that he now explores to a murderous extent later on, it is very much here and not anywhere near to the level that I think they want you to think, that it's buried deep down inside him and it's bringing out all of his worst things. It's pretty much right there at the top. He's openly challenging O'Brien to some sort of a test of wills, something against him. So it's there. So it's hard to say that anything that we see from him later on is all that out of character.
Yeah, if there's a narrative weakness to this episode, I was thinking about it as the clip was playing. I guess you could write it off as like Garrick is just trying to get on O'Brien's nerves, but I find it very odd that he brings up Setlik 3 now. I think it would make more sense if we had this conversation later after he's starting to get exposed to the drug a little bit, and he becomes more and more paranoid. And maybe we could have just started off with the idea of this Cardassian game, because that does come back, and then slowly as the episode progresses, starting to become more and more challenging, and then bring up the past, and then have that be the climax. But I mean, as it is, I think it's a misstep, but I don't think it's a damning misstep.
No, even this step, I think, is pretty in character with him. He is just going to mess around. He's identified, I'm sure he knows that of all of our main characters, Bajorans aside, O'Brien has shown the most distaste, if not racism, towards Cardassians. So that is the person that he is going to go after and needle. So this part's the part that I don't mind it. Where this is retroactively an issue is the big ask that they ask of the audience and of every character in the show at the end of the episode, because it's really setting a stage for undercutting their argument later on. And we'll get into that when we get into that. But it's interesting watching this episode again, knowing or listening to this clip, knowing where they end up. And you're like, oh, man, it's all right here. The whole thing about Garrick is right here, right off the bat.
Yeah, I think, again, I agree with Matt. A little bit of a misstep early, but I don't know. I guess maybe we're intelligent viewers. Maybe they didn't need to put it that much into our face. I would have even have bought it had they been on the station and realized, well, we've got the whatever regiment here. Chief, what are your thoughts? You were in the Battle of Setlik 3. What do we, how do we want to, what do you think we should do to handle this? Or here's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? So on and so forth. It could have came up a little bit easier that way. But yeah, a little too much in your face to start it.
Yeah, the in your face is the turning to O'Brien. The part with Nog and all the game discussion, that's perfectly fine. Interesting Cardassian just mentality that informs the rest of the episode, kind of. But it was the turning is showing your hand a little bit too much at the wrong step. Most likely.
Yeah. So let's continue on. They arrive at Empok Nor. As Garrick bypasses the airlock booby trap, we get a quick shot of 2 Cardassians coming alive within the station. And let the slasher film begin.
Before we get in, boy, did anybody else notice how absolutely gorgeous the Empok Nor looked just coming alive? Really good use of CG, I think, through this. It just looked really, really evocative, like I said before. It's goofy how much just coming up to the station with it on its side just is like that little bit of unsettling. We saw that before when they approached the Enterprise D when everybody was de-evolved, I think.
Oh, yeah, and the thing was rotating.
Yeah,
it's goofy because obviously they just could have piloted the runabout up at a slight angle and turned the camera and it all would have been fine. But it just is that little bit of, unsettling kind of a thing. And also, how many actors have all poured themselves into that same UV suit from First Contact, Voyager, now DS9?
they got to get their money's worth.
That's right.
So we continue on, and Garrick finds the lake-filled pods that our Cardassian soldiers rose up from, and he recognizes them as 3rd Battalion, First Order soldiers. Nog has to go back to the ship for a tool, but when he arrives, he sees it floating and then exploding. The crew congregates and goes over their options. They realize the first order of business has to be sending a distress signal back home. They have to get the deflector dish and get it up and running. So they decide to efficiently split the teams up to do different parts of the job all at once.
Man,
never split the team.
Yes,
I was gonna say we're already breaking like half of the rules from Scream.
Yeah. Oh, classic. So,
also,
I even think someone says that in this episode, "I'll be right back" or "I'll be right behind you" or something.
Yeah. The other thing that I could see how people would be annoyed in that they never bother to explain these Cardassian drugged out people. But that, I think, is to an extent an homage in and of itself, because you don't over explain the most likely even supernatural bad guy.
I was gonna say, do we really get an explanation from Michael Myers in the first Halloween?
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I'm like, that is, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Fuller on this one, that's an homage and not just a bad plot hole. That was an intentional, like, hey, maybe they were doing an experiment. All right, explanation enough. Let's just go on.
now, I know we're probably just reviewing the notes here, not going to talk about it too much, but I really didn't like the fact that Garrick just somehow happens to touch the one part on the stairway and gets a dermal, I guess, exposure to the actual drug. I think it would have been better had it been an airborne drug. And that's why they had to get out of the station and kind of get out of there quickly. Throw those guys, the soldiers that they were experimenting with in the pods, get out there as quick as they can, leave a couple booby traps. But I wasn't a big fan of that aspect. I think they could have sold it a little bit differently.
I think it was supposed to be airborne. I think maybe it's another case of 90s storytelling where they haven't quite realized the audience is smarter than they are. So I think, you have this point where it gets on his skin, but I didn't, at least in my head, I didn't think it wasn't like not in the atmosphere as well. I felt like it was like maybe it condensed because the station had no life support. It was shut down. It was cold, all that stuff.
Well, that's a good point. I just, as you said, they seem to be thinking the audience isn't that smart, and they have to show it to us. The physical hand on the camera angle right to the hand. He touches it, looks at it, carries on. Like that is just so. I don't know. Again,
it's Star Trek. I mean, like when they had disease, like the naked time disease, they always have to scratch their hand when they get it,
and the sound effect.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, God. I think it could have been probably. This is where I think so much of this episode is kind of maybe easy mode, heavy-handed, sometimes misguided. I think this is something where it's like, would it? I don't know. I'm going to ask right now. Would it have been more effective of an episode when we get to the turn that Garak is now the murderer? We are obviously a savvy audience, and I think even at the time we kind of know, oh well, this is not him. This is because, oh yeah, he touched that thing. They made a point of it. They looked at it and they discussed it. Would it have been more interesting just to have you questioning throughout it and not have that already throw away, oh, when they get back to the station, Bashir will give him a drug and it'll make it all better? I think it could have been a little bit more interesting, just like, oh my God, why is he just turned now? If this is the story we're going to go with, would it have been more interesting not to show your hand so early in this?
It would have been more of a mystery, an added mystery to the episode.
It would, and potentially it could be better. I just fear from that scenario that they have to have, if they wrote it like that, they would have to have the scene from the end of Psycho, where it's like they're in the infirmary at the end and they have to explain the whole thing in just an exposition dump. So I mean, it's 6 of 1.
They practically did already, though. That's the thing. I mean, Bashir shows up in his collect the paycheck scene at the end of the episode to do more or less that anyhow. So it's like, it was already there. It wouldn't have been all that much different.
I don't know. I felt like the scene at the end for Bashir is just saying that, yeah, we flushed it out of his system.
Yeah. Reset button.
Thank you, Alexander Siddig, for showing up.
And hit the big red reset button. So let's continue on.
At least he's not like Rene Auberjonois showing up for just one scene where he has to put on all that makeup. He just has to get dressed.
Was Odo even in this episode? I don't even remember seeing him in.
They shoehorned him in to explain about going to the Empok Nor about booby traps, I think.
Oh, all right.
They put them all in the teaser for the most part, other than Bashir.
Right. So Garak and O'Brien discuss how this seems like a lot of trouble to go through to protect a dead station. Meanwhile, Nog is guarding and doesn't notice the shadows sneaking around him. O'Brien calls him back just as the shadowy knife goes into the air. Back with our red shirts, and they are working on the...
you know what, Blair? I'll interrupt here.
Certainly.
I did not like that we kept seeing the two guys. Granted, you see in Halloween Michael Myers at points, like lurking in the background or something. I don't want that veil removed like right away, and that is just a normal Cardassian. Like his eyes are normal and everything. I would like a little bit more mystery with this.
I don't know how much what could be changed exactly, because we know that they're Cardassians. They're just regular Cardassians that are hyped up on this drug. I guess maybe it could have deformed them.
I just
And
don't show them at all. I
well,
mean,
I do appreciate, just as a fan of the genre, that they did do more than one POV shot.
right.
If you're
Show
gonna do a
like the
slasher.
Yeah, like leave it as the POV shot. Don't pull it as a third person view of them just hiding behind a box. I don't know. It's the watching Nog walk around and having nothing actually happen to him is more interesting because of the mystery to it and the unknown rather than seeing him walking around, seeing a guy just kind of creep on him and then just disappear without doing anything. I I mean it's probably not that big a deal one way or the other, but I don't think seeing him contributed anything. I think having not seen him may have contributed something.
Maybe, but I mean, when slasher films normally do that, it's because you don't know what the evil is supposed to look like, and so they want to save that reveal for like later. But like I said, we kind of know what a Cardassian looks like, so unless this drug altered their physical appearance some way, I don't think it's a big, like, something that we need to in Act 3 reveal.
Well, then that could have been like a parallel. Hide what they look like, and then finally you see, oh, it's just a normal Cardassian. Zoinks, there's a parallel. Our normal Cardassian is not that much different than this one. Have that as a reveal in and of itself that, oh, we were expecting this to be the half melted Cardassian from the Kira slasher episode. Oh no, wait, this is just a normal Cardassian. I think this is where I think they could have played a little bit more in the episode with like the same building blocks and just changed expectations a little bit, but they didn't.
Well, what if you wanted to change expectations, I think what should have happened is they shouldn't have found the infirmary first thing. I think maybe that should have been something that they discovered toward the end of Act 2, beginning of Act 3 sort of deal, where these people keep getting killed off. They randomly disappear. You don't hear from them again. You know, a couple of them end up dead, and you have no idea what's doing it. And then you could have had that reveal that you're talking about. But
see, for me, I'm not a big slasher film, so I know you guys are, in your glory in this type of thing. But I knew Nog was in no danger. I think it would have had more value had maybe it been the Bolian. That, oh, he's about to get killed, and then they don't kill him, and then you think, oh, well, maybe, just maybe, more than the three people will get out of this alive, and they kind of tease you. But with it being Nog, there was no real sense of danger. And again, I'm not a slasher movie type guy, and I know that pretty much everyone usually dies anyways. But I just think maybe, from my vantage point, I always like to see the no-name guy somehow survive. The no-name security guy that, they had one on Enterprise in that Vulcan zombie one. He actually made it out. And I remember that. I thought for sure he was a goner. And he ends up surviving, only to die, maybe 5 minutes later.
I was going to say before the season's over, he gets zapped by the Zindi sphere.
He does. But it was still... I like that fact that I have a little fridge magnet on my at home, and it has the it's from the arena, so it has the picture of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a red shirt guy, and it just has a big fail and the word fail with pointing to the red shirt guy, because he's done for. So I don't know. I just always love the underdog, the no-name guy somehow surviving. And it just, I don't know, like you said, we knew right from the beginning none of these people were going to survive. I like it when they kind of throw a curveball there.
No, I really like that point too. Because your expectation is that guy would have died in that walking around. Again, here's where I think they could have played a little bit more.
Yeah, well, shall we continue on then? Because I'm sure we have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I'll just, my primary thing for this episode is what it lacks in creativity, it makes up for in style, and sometimes that can get points from me.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that. We all know we love collectively on this show when they do these types of episodes.
So back with our red shirts, and we find them working on the promenade. They hear a door on the second floor, and then the turbo lift. They wait phasers drawn, but are murdered from behind. Yeah, I don't know. That was I like the one girl who gets flipped over the top of the railing. That was kind of cool.
I mean, that was cool, but obviously the big slasher moment is at some point in any of these series, the slasher comes through a mirror or a window or something
Yeah.
for a nice big jump scare.
But I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but they both turn and jump in front of the turbo lift. Not something I would probably do, but whatever. I fully expected something to happen there. But anyways.
Well, I mean, again, you not being familiar with the genre, that's why they end up dead. Like, everyone who dies in it's just a trope of the genre. Everyone who dies in a slasher movie does something stupid, and it gets them killed.
Yeah, I mean, granted, they're not on a promenade in the space station, but this exact scene has been done 1,000,000 times. That's a conservative number. This is like straight out of every single slasher movie ever. The misdirect, they turn and then they're stabbed. I mean, it's just every one of them.
So O'Brien and his group head to the promenade. They deal with the dead before getting back to work. O'Brien has to finish it up. He orders the 2 remaining red shirts to go somewhere else, and they refuse.
Come on! Yeah, no more splitting up.
Yeah, exactly. But O'Brien sends Garrick with them. However, Garrick has his own ideas in what will be our next clip.
Was to surprise them. Probably using the internal sensors to track us. Take it easy. We're going to get out of here. You can count on that. We've got to stay focused. That looks like Pichetti was almost done getting the microfusion reactor back online. I'll finish that. Then I'll go back down to the cargo bay. How are you doing with the conduits? Done. Good. You and Amaro get down to auxiliary control and reconfigure the pulse generator. We're going to split up. We have to. If we don't send out a signal, we're never going to get off the station. But Chief, what if we... I need you, Doctor. You can do this. Don't worry, I'll watch your back. Snow's off. We're supposed to be watching Pichetti's back. Look what happened to them. What if I send Garrick with you too? Will that make you feel better? I'm flattered, but I'm afraid I have other plans. What are you talking about? I don't intend just standing around waiting to be killed. Meaning what? Meaning I'm going after those 2 Cardassian soldiers and to neutralize them. Besides, all this whining is giving me a headache. You're gonna have more than a headache if you don't do what the Chief wants. Amaro, you'd like to shoot me, wouldn't you? You're dying to kill the Cardassian. Any Cardassian. Let him go. If he thinks he can neutralize the Cardassians, let him try. You're doing us all a favor. That's the spirit. Why don't you come with me, Chief? Kill a few Cardies. It'll be like old times. Wouldn't you like to avenge their deaths? No. I just want to get everyone home. You're fighting your instincts. I can see it. But the hero of Setlec 3 is still inside there somewhere. You're gonna go. Go.
Yeah, another way this episode gets points from me too is that if you've seen Dirty Harry, if you've seen the first Hellraiser, this is Andrew Robinson in his element.
An element, by the way, he hated about this episode.
No, because I'm sure he's trying to escape that kind of typecasting, but I mean, there's a reason that those are like some of his most remembered roles.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But he has said he's not satisfied with this episode just because he has worked so long to try and get away from the Dirty Harry psychopath thing.
Yeah, no, I can't blame him, but God, is he good at it?
He is, and the thing that I thought about in this clip was just another really good Miles O'Brien performance. Just the guy that's seen a lot, carries a lot of emotional weight and history behind him. Just nothing spectacular from him in this episode, but damn, I mean, he's just always good.
Yeah, and it fits the slasher tropes too, because the person who's always usually it's the final girl, but in this time it's a final guy. It's always the plain everyday kind of person that you think doesn't have much up their sleeve, but in fact they're the smartest person of the group.
Yeah, well, Garrick ran into Rambo O'Brien again here. Just count his lucky stars. O'Brien didn't come in shirtless to that last fight.
I mean, either Rambo O'Brien or, like, if we're going to stick with the slasher genre, it reminded me of Nancy setting all those booby traps at the end of Nightmare on Elm Street 1.
Also true, sure, yeah.
Which she was able to do just by reading an anti-personnel manual. She's smartest high schooler in Ohio.
World's worst actress, but yes.
I like that movie.
I do too, but terrible actress.
No, she's not great.
Oh, understatement, Matt. I'm sorry.
I do like her in the third one, though. I think she got better in the third one.
Fully disagree, but the third one's the best movie in the series, in my opinion, but still awful. Awful.
There are worse. I've seen the depths of hell in terms of slasher movie acting. She is nowhere near the bottom.
Well, that very well might be true, yes.
Well, let's continue on then. We find Garrick at a computer terminal. He finds he cannot access it. He senses someone close and keeps pretending to access it. Hiding in the broken stasis chamber, he succeeds in disabling a Cardassian, though he oddly says to himself, it felt good. And I must admit, this is what kills me about these type of episodes. If these Cardassian soldiers are, essentially your special forces, oh, be afraid of them because they're, their name, like the SS or something like that. And yet they get killed that easily. They get killed that Garrick has enough time to say hello there or whatever he happens to say and then shoots him. However, after running an analysis on the body, he learns that the soldier has been given a massive dose of a psychotropic drug. Garrick opines that it appeared to be a failed experiment to enhance the Cardassians' xenophobic tendencies, turning already fanatical soldiers into unstable killing machines.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that, when you think of a Cardassian, what do you think of? Their low opinion of themselves and distrust and distaste for other species? Oh, no, wait, that's what they are. So that's a little goofy. I don't think they need any enhancement, but
I mean, it's goofy, but like you're arguing over the physics in what's supposed to be a slasher episode. So like I take it as such, and yeah, sure, it just makes them like really psycho xenophobic. Okay, fine.
This is where I think they try to give them some supernatural attribute, right? Like the Michael Myers thing of him disappearing at the end. He's somewhat natural person, but no, it's actually more of a force of nature. They tried to give them something here, but we get no impression of that. Like Blair said, they're actually pretty lame.
Wait, did you actually like? I don't know if they're trying to give them an unnatural vibe with this. I get that they're trying to give them a dangerous, like a reason for them being dangerous, but like I never thought of the end of Halloween when it came to those two.
I think this was it's supposed to be giving them something else, some extra meat to them, something extra terrifying to these people. I mean, it's not just the mechanism to get Garrick off the rocker. It's to give these guys an extra credible threat. And to Blair's point, we see them not do anything special. There's nothing to them other than just normal Cardassian stuff. So it's like, it's disappointing.
Perhaps though, if we saw, like, if you were to say, let's just reverse it, it was, the Federation people were in stasis, and we said it was, well, Section 31, we'd be more on alert, I guess you could say. Even if they said they were the Obsidian, this seems to be a group of Obsidian Order type people. But they've named a regiment that absolutely means nothing to us. And had we maybe heard of this regiment before or heard of these special Cardassian soldiers, maybe it would have given more credence, but it just didn't.
Some
Yeah.
Obsidian Order Death Squad.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. But at the same time, to me, it didn't give them a supernatural edge. If anything, it just made me think that they were like, if we're going to use the tropes of the genre, it made me think that they were more cult members, which it plays out that way, kind of.
Yeah, but kind of. You put a qualifier to it. It's ultimately they didn't give us any. There's nothing special about these two guys.
No, granted, but again, I think it's supposed to be this sort of like not even a misdirect, but like these are not the real threat. The real threat is coming in the third act, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, but still, you want to build them as a credible misdirect too.
Sure. No, they're not going to be winning any Slasher of the Year awards. I'll give you that.
No. Now, I do have one small nitpick, just because it does, So we hear Garak talking about Setlik 3 and the war hero that O'Brien was, and Hanson, maybe you can re-jog my memory, but didn't they say that O'Brien led a handful of people against a regiment of Cardassian whatever soldiers in Setlik 3 and defeated them? Was regiment the word that they used?
I think it was something like a Cardassian squadron or something like that. It's in the first episode in TNG where they mention with the Cardassians that they mention his
I thought
history.
they mentioned it again, but I thought they used the word regiment. And if they use the word regiment, then I can tell you O'Brien is more than just a war hero, because a company is about 100 people. A battalion is probably 1,000 people. And a regiment, good God, would be thousands of people. So
I don't remember the verbiage. I'll have to go back and look.
I did just confirm with the transcript. You led 24 men against the Baraka encampment and took out an entire regiment of Cardassians.
So So anyways.
Yeah, that's what this episode says. I want to go back and see what the TNG one said.
Yeah. I know, and just a small nitpick, because for a few people to lead against a regiment would be, and good God, that is incredible odds. And yeah, he would probably.
O'Brien's awesome. We've already established this.
He would have done more than Rambo in that one, but he would have had no clothes on to do that.
I don't know if it's directly scales like that, but yeah, sure. He might have just thrown an entire torpedo at just a barracks of people.
True. And I know it's just a small nitpick, and that's just my military nomenclature kind of coming out there, and based on how it is nowadays, I guess you could argue. So, but anyways, just wanted to throw it out there. And
well, who's to say a Cardassian regiment, my nerdy voice, is the same as a human regiment?
Absolutely. You're right. So let's continue on here. He informs O'Brien of Garak informs O'Brien of his discovery, but his strange behavior causes O'Brien to observe that Garak doesn't have the face of a tailor anymore. Garak leaves to go after the other Cardassian. And just to interrupt here, again, if you're here on a mission, you want to send out a distress signal, Garak probably is the guy that you want to send out there and go hunting down the guy while you do your work. If you do it right, you keep your group together. Garak goes off and hunts them down and safety in numbers and go do your job. But anyways.
And I genuinely really like that moment where you pointed out in the notes where O'Brien turns to him and goes, "Those aren't the eyes of a tailor anymore." Because who in that group is more capable of recognizing that flip of a switch in somebody than O'Brien? He can just see it in their eyes that, this is gone. He's gone over the deep end on something here.
Yeah, it couldn't be anyone but O'Brien.
Mhm.
Yeah,
logically.
it's I think that's about the most solid moment of the episode. It's such a tiny little thing. It's not part of a clip or anything, but it's just like, ooh, that's actually kind of like a chilling moment in an episode that I thought, you know, it's meant to be scary. The subtlest little, most chilling moments. That
Dare I call it like a Dr. Loomis kind of moment?
sure, yeah. I mean, it's just like it slips by, and if you're not paying attention, and it's very informative to all the characters involved, and it's good, really good.
And also, too, what I find, and maybe it happened a little earlier, is this is no longer O'Brien the engineer. This is O'Brien the leader and O'Brien the soldier now. You know, this is no longer, hey guys, let's go fix a conduit. This is a wow, we are in something deep here, and we are in survival mode now. And
Yeah,
I
it's
like
a
that
life
aspect as
and
well.
life and death situation. Like, I don't think you would ever, as a former soldier, even if you're not one anymore, I don't think you would ever get rid of that internally.
No,
That's
and I go ahead, Sponsky.
yeah, I was just going to tag that. It's like we see that that's his theme in this, and that he's no longer that, but it's something you can't separate from it. It's still him. It's always been him. It's always going to be him, but it's not his main identifiable characteristic anymore. But it's something that is just him, and it's indistinguishable from the rest.
Yeah, it's you couldn't put Geordie LaForge in this situation. Only O'Brien could be in this situation. The only other maybe engineer I would argue would maybe be Scotty from TOS when he was put in command of the Enterprise. But you definitely see the switch flip there. But I don't think you could ever see it from a from a Geordie LaForge aspect.
Just one little moment, I gotta say, man, was it always awesome when Scotty was in command of the ship. He was great.
A lot of people, like, I've heard other podcasts where people nitpick that, and I'm like, what are you talking about? He's awesome.
Oh, I 100% agree.
He comes through every time, doesn't he? He was always great.
Absolutely.
I still say some of his best moments in that original show are when he's in command, like Taste of Armageddon. That's probably my favorite episode of him doing his thing.
Yeah, always a great callback for Scotty. So Garrett goes on with his task and finds the other Cardassian stalking our Bolian friend and Amaro, but he is unable to prevent the death of our little Bolian friend, who actually gets killed pretty gruesomely, to be honest with you.
Stomping on the throat of a guy.
Wow.
And by the way, Amaro, whoa, boy, did that guy freeze up. Oh, what are you doing there? Stomping his neck? Let me just sit here and soak this all in for a moment.
What kind of security guy are you? That's brutal.
I know, like, they showed him, like, putting his gun down or something to get a tool, but, like, bum rush the guy or something, come on.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it was a vicious scene. I really, that was probably the best death scene in this entire episode, I thought. So,
yeah, I mean, boy, what I loved.
It's comparatively slow than the others, which makes it more gruesome.
Yeah, and this is like an episode. Man, it would be nice if they could give this a crack again in something like in Discovery, where it's like they can't do a sex episode when they have a sex episode. They can't do a violent episode when they want to do a violent episode. So it's just you kind of just get like a neutered thing,
I kind of felt like they did a pretty good job of that in Discovery when they went onto the other ship and found the tardigrade.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the kind of thing,
That
you don't
really
need
was
that.
Scary.
Yeah, you don't need it every episode, but if you're looking to tell a type of a story, tell it right. And they can't quite tell it right.
Yeah, I think it has to do with syndicated show in the 90s. We're seeing now with Discovery being pretty much a cable on demand, not having to be censored kind of show. They can tell that kind of story.
But it's just you can't get around that it's a little bit lame. Like when they, in the end, where Garrick takes the time to string up all the bodies.
But come on, that's the end of Halloween with the bodies being like, one's on the bed, one's tied up and flipped upside down, one's in the closet,
Yeah, but they don't have like a nice little sling under their armpits like they're in this. It's just like, come on. They should be on frickin' meat hooks or hung by their neck off the promenade, not
Well,
just like in a
yeah,
little sex swing thing.
that's the thing, right? Is like they should have gone a little bit further, like, you know, do the actual slasher thing of like have a random like piece of glass console in the middle of the promenade for no reason. Just have Garrick like throw one of the bodies through it, because that's
Right.
always a slasher thing.
So it's just that in between of like, if you can't do it right, should you do it at all? Because I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, really? It's just a bunch of actors taking their weight off and just slumping on a nice thick band of fabric. And it's just,
Well, also too, here's the thing too, is that I feel like, you know, as much as I love classic slashers and stuff like that, if you watch something like that 20, 30 years later, unless you're a fan of the genre and you're a fan of filmmaking, they may not be all that scary to a new audience. And maybe that's just because like they're tame in comparison to what we can see now. So I can see something like that happening with this episode too. It was fine for its time. I still think it's a fun little homage. I still think it's a fine episode. But yeah, I mean, comparatively speaking, we've seen a lot worse on regular TV now. So
yeah. But I think, I mean, with a certain amount of creativity, I think you can get around those limitations. With this, I think for the most part, they don't. And they just are happy to sit at that limitation. And I don't think it helps the episode. I think it hurts it to a little degree here or there. Because that takes me out of it. Of like, Garrick is gone well off the deep end. And he half-asks these nice little safe harnesses for people.
yeah, I mean, we don't spend too much time with to be honest with you, because like I don't really pay attention to that sort of stuff by the time we get to this part of the episode, because I just like seeing Andrew Robinson do his crazy shtick, and that's mostly what I'm focused on is the performance, which, you know, it's standard for him. But this is an episode that, you know, I would hesitate calling it a guilty pleasure, because I don't think it's a bad episode, but this is one of those that I'm just drawn to.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, ultimately, I'll be torn on whether I'm going to label it bad or not, based on what's going to happen here in like 2 seconds in Blair's notes.
Before we do that, though, just on your meat hooks and you know, glass tables thing, I think, you know, as you were talking, my thought for this, what would have been cool, was to have the bodies hanging from where Jake and Nog always hang out on that spot where you know, it's Nog's spot, and Nog comes up and finds all these bodies hanging off.
I'm going to give Blair an applause break on that. I like that idea quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Especially after last week's episode where
well, also too, like they could have spread a couple of them out. You know, 2 could have been hanging from there, 1 could have been hanging from like the balcony and where Quark's bar is supposed to be, and I don't know, 1 could be like thrown through a glass panel.
Or just, I mean, this is where I think they could have done something different. Blair's idea is great. Have them like playing like in the fake Quark bar equivalent or something, you know? They could do something different. They went the little bit of a lame route.
So speaking of lame, Amaro sees Garrick kill the Cardassian and is relieved. However, Garrick finally loses control and succumbs to the effects of the psychotropic drug. And Garrick stabs poor Amaro with a flux coupler.
And then this is where I think it's arguably the ruinous turn of the episode. I know Matt is going to probably kind of disagree to an extent or another here. This is where I think they went Trek cliche, and it's always a character that we know, one of our main cast members, due to extraneous, you know, special circumstances, alien possession, whatever, a regular cast member go nutty. I would have either liked to have seen that all the way through, even though that would have been a cliche, or go all in on the Cardassian super soldier, zombie, dead-eyed, drugged out, cult member, supernatural, whatevers. Go one or the other. The fact that they split the difference here, I think, is questionable, but then how they end up resolving it at the end is borderline ruinous.
I mean, what else? What other way could they go with this? I'm
Like
just curious.
Like I said, just go all in. Have it as the zombie zombie Cardassians attacking. I mean, just like have it as that. Have that as the through story, because then you don't have
Oh,
this.
you may never have Garrick succumb.
Well, or have him like fighting this, but
Yeah.
not succumb to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would have been cool.
I think it would have been. I think it could have worked, but I hesitate calling it ruinous. But that's a personal thing.
The
Yeah.
one thing I must admit that it does benefit from, and again, this is looking forward, is in that episode where they're stranded on the essentially the pit, the planet.
And
And-
Nog won't walk. Let him
Well-
walk behind him.
Yeah. That was a great callback there. So there was merit in that regards, but I think it would have been better if there'd been more maybe Cardassian zombies or whatever, and as Smonsky said, Garrick fighting it, and he can still kill the Cardassians and feel good per
Right.
se, but
They pretty much do that later when they make the what I lovingly like to call the 28 Days Later episode of Enterprise with the Vulcan zombies.
Yeah, that's the basically. Man, I would have liked to have seen that here.
yeah, my favorite episode of Enterprise by far. I love
Really?
that episode. I don't know why I hate horror movies. I hate slasher movies, but I have an affection for zombie movies. My favorite Enterprise of all.
You know
it's
that
is
there.
a straight homage to like 28 Days Later, that episode.
That one I think is really good. That's like where they pick a story and they kind of nail it. Their Borg episode, I think, kind of does the same thing. That does a great job of just building dread throughout it.
Mhm.
Well, in that episode, you do have like T'Pol, who is slowly succumbing to the same kind of madness, but is still trying to fight against it and get them off the ship and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, just clone that episode onto this one. That's what we should have had.
So let's continue on here.
Oh my
O'Brien-
no!
Oh,
I mean, come on. How
I'm
is
ready.
it not the no? How is it not the most perfect visual of like throw some fog on the promenade and have zombie Cardassians kind of walking through the fog coming towards you? Ooh, I want that episode.
That would be good. I can't
don't have
disagree.
That just sounds like you want like the movie The Fog to take place on Deep Space Nine.
Yes, man. How are you? We're speaking the same language here, buddy.
All right. Well, let's continue on. O'Brien finishes his task and tries to contact the others, but gets no response. He finds Amaro just in time for him to say Garrick killed him. Nog gets nervous as O'Brien immediately goes on guard. He realizes Garrick is under the influence of the drug. Since Garrick knows their objective of contacting DS9, O'Brien doesn't see any other choice than going after him, killing him if that's what it takes. And I like the fact here that, again, I really love the Nog character. We talked about it last week, how he's becoming a regular. And I just really like the fact that this is Nog thinking as a cadet. Oh, let's just reason with them. He doesn't have that experience. He's a little naive here. And I really like that he maintains that throughout the episode, that O'Brien is essentially the guy who has to do all the dirty work, and Nog is essentially escapes this episode with his innocence for the most part still intact. He didn't have to kill anyone. He didn't, he's lucky to be alive. He grew up a little bit on after seeing what happened, but I just like that O'Brien's like, no, there is no reasoning. Shut up. Let's this is what we are doing, and Nog just follows along.
It's not like Nog's that far out of line, though. I mean, it's an interesting decision. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but they don't show Garrick as all that batty. He's still very much in control of like a lot of his higher reasoning and stuff. So it's not that far fetched to Nog to say like maybe there is something there we can still talk to. So Nog's, I don't think, super wrong there.
But O'Brien has seen what a Cardassian who is in a war-fevered pitch type thing can be like. And I don't know. I agree with you. It's Nog's not out of character, not a bad idea, but I like how O'Brien's like, no, this is what we are doing, and this is Soldier or Rambo O'Brien again.
Yeah, I mean, they're both. It turns out, O'Brien is right in the actions because that's how the episode ends. But I don't think either one of them strictly right or strictly wrong. We see that it really isn't, and this is going to be one of my arguments at the end. I don't see Garrick as all that much different than normal Garrick, unfortunately.
That's interesting. Well, the cat and mouse game begins. O'Brien, Nog, and Garrick sneak around and do scary things. Until finally Garrick takes Nog captive. O'Brien is forced to get his friend back. And I just want to throw another nitpick in here. How did the Cardassian game get on the bridge or ops? Was that just
coincidence? They said the commander of the station had his own.
Okay. All right. Okay. I must have missed that then. So, okay. I'm okay with that one then. So O'Brien tries to reason with him, but Garrick continues to push O'Brien on his experience at Setlik 3, saying he enjoyed killing Cardassians and wants to recapture that feeling. O'Brien finally proposes a hand-to-hand duel, and Garrick readily agrees. O'Brien makes his way through the promenade, finding his crew's bodies hanging from the second level. He soon finds Garrick holding Nog with a rifle, and they both disarm in a tense situation. O'Brien puts his tricorder down, and they begin fighting. And Garrick is winning and taunting him, which I'm glad to see O'Brien did get the crap kicked out of him, because I think this is, realistically, Garrick should win this. Garrick is partially blinded by the drug, but the chief incapacitates him using a simple trap, a tricorder phaser bomb. However, he finds it did not kill him. Later in the infirmary, everyone is safe, back on DS9. Garrick's system is purged of the drug, and Garrick expresses his extreme regret in our final clip.
Before we go into that final clip, did anybody else get a little bummed that this just ends in like a fist fight? For all intents and purposes, it ends in just two older guys punching each other.
Yeah, it was built up so much more, but
yeah. All right. Well, here's the final clip coming your way.
He should be all right in a few days. I've neutralized the psychotropic compound that was affecting his nervous system.
When we come out of the clip, I'll just do our break to closing credits line, and then then we can talk about it.
Yeah, we probably should talk about this one.
In a way, he's not. The drug brought out the worst parts of him and allowed them to take over. He wasn't in control of his actions. A total command.
I thought you might like to know that we salvaged the plasma manifold. Being installed right now.
Mission accomplished.
I guess it didn't exactly go the way any of us expected. You know there's going to be an inquest.
Yes, I've been told that. Chief, I was hoping to ask a favor.
Don't worry. Say all the facts.
It's not about that. I'd like you to express my deepest regrets to Amaro's wife. I'd talk to her myself, but I'm not sure she'd welcome that.
I'll tell her. I'd appreciate it. Julian tells me the blast broke a couple of your ribs.
Well, it could have been worse. If I'd been any closer to that phaser, it would have killed me.
Don't take this the wrong way, but That was the plan.
I understand.
See you around.
As we break to closing credits. So what do we think about that last clip, guys?
Well, they ask the audience to swallow a heck of a lot in that last part, because my argument here is, excuse me, that first clip showed that a lot of this is kicking around in Garrick before anything happens. And then throughout the episode and right here, they really emphasize that all this did was bring out what's already in you. And we see that it didn't have to be all that digging deep to bring this up. It was there pretty much at the surface before. They don't tell you that this drug is like making you have the rage virus like in 28 Days Later. This is just releasing your inhibitions almost, because it also doesn't show that he is all that out of control. You're still seeing the same Garrick more or less, but just sweatier through big chunks of the episode. So this is all a big thing for you to kind of just accept that he will be forgiven for this, especially at the end where they mention one of his victim had a wife. That's a big thing. And it's basically left as a reset button thing at the end. So I think it's a big, gigantic ask for you to forgive him at all. What they should have done, if they're going to keep this story, disappear him until the Cardassian War happens, and then make a big deal of, you know what, this guy's a maniac, but it's a war effort, special circumstances. You know, we're going to spring the one mutineer in Starfleet history out to help the war effort. We're gonna bring Garrick out for this. It's the only
we've seen this happen though. Again, we've seen this. Didn't he go to jail for a little bit and magically he comes back? And maybe the second or third episode after the summer break.
That's what you call strike one. Then this is strike two, where he actually had a body count associated with it. It's a too big of a pill for me to swallow here.
It's still not strike three though. So
yeah, sure. So man, I don't like this ending one little bit. The only saving grace is that, yes, like you guys said, Nog does give him the stink eye later on. But realistically, I will keep an eye out for it. If O'Brien ever says anything slightly warm and agreeable to Garrick, I'm going to go, no, he shouldn't have done that. That guy killed one of the people under his command. And I don't think O'Brien would have forgiven him for it, no matter what I was tripping balls at the time excuse. You're still held responsible for your actions, or you should be, you know. Oh man, it just was like a real bad ending to this episode, in my opinion. Terrible ending. I'm happy to hear somebody argue against it, but it's a bad twist, I think, but then with a ruinous ending.
I mean, I can't. Well, I don't know if it's a bad twist. I can't argue the ending though. But
the twist is my opinion. We'll say that this is, I think, bad storytelling. In that, why do we watch anything that doesn't have consequences? There are no consequences to him stabbing a Starfleet officer.
Sure,
well, we see it time and again in Star Trek. Geordi LaForge tries to assassinate the Klingon ambassador or chancellor. You know, and it wasn't his fault because he was held. He was forced to do that. But we tend to give our favorite people, or our main characters, or the ones we love, excuses to get out of their actions. And it wasn't his fault. We can carry on, and we still love our characters.
But those are like genuine, like science fiction. You've been programmed to do this. They go out of their way so much in this episode to say that this is him. This is him doing this. It's just turning it up to 11 here or there in a few places. And the fact that they don't show that the other Cardassians, the ones that are our zombie ones, are all that special, I think that argues that Garrick isn't doing anything all that special himself.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, Brad Dourif killed a person, and that was all him, and all he got was sent to his room for the rest of the trip home.
Well, because they don't believe in capital punishment, I suppose. But he was shut away for a long time
in his room.
Well, resources. But if he survived the Kazon thing, I don't think they would have let him leave that room anymore. They would have raised his, replicator ration a little bit, perhaps. I don't know, guys.
I don't know. You're
bitter pill. Bitter pill.
Yeah, you are bitter this week. I mean, I can't. Like I said, I can't argue the ending. It's the typical. It's the end of Psycho, where it's just it's whatever. The movie's done after the corpse is found in the basement, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I hesitate to call this bad. I think it could. I think in this day and age, it could be better. But I still like this one. I still watch it around this time of year too.
Well, why don't we go into our final thoughts and ratings then, where we can give the things we liked about it and the things that were bad about it. And Smonsky, why don't you go first this week?
Yeah, tell us why this is a 1, Smonsky. I know you want to.
No, it's not going to be a 1 because there are quite a bit of things that are good with it. I mean, O'Brien's good. Andrew Robinson is good. I think there's significant questions around the decisions that they made his character do, and the overall writing I don't think is particularly good. I think they tried to hedge a lot of bets in trying to do this episode without jumping all the way in, and then they just kind of went into Star Trek tropes, which I get that you're going to have fun with the genre tropes of a slasher thing, but when it ends up just falling victim to what we see in Star Trek all too often of a crazy Starfleet officer, special circumstances doing something, that's not a wink and a nod to the audience. That's just, this again. So I thought that was very questionable to go that way. And then the ending was just way too much we ripped this show constantly when they hit that reset button, when this is not the show that they should be doing that to. And that this is one of those reset buttons that makes you feel upset that they didn't see through on it. Make it have repercussions. It's not that big of a deal to make the hired assassin guy with extreme moral ambiguity surrounding his character, have him have a bad repercussion that hurts his character from here on out. It's not that big of a deal. Go for it. So when they don't, it's aggravating. So it's not 1 star. I can't say it's 3 because I think it's so critically flawed in such important areas. It's a 2-star episode.
Okay, well, thanks, Smonsky. I'll go next because I'll let Matt, you go last because this is kind of your genre. For me, I didn't mind this episode. I think the more we talk about it, there were certain aspects that I do agree with Smonsky on. Even though I've seen this episode countless number of times, I'm still, at the end of the day, I'm still always unsettled by Garrick killing the people and not having the repercussions and essentially the reset button. So I think for myself, I've always struggled with that ever since I've even seen it from day one. I do like the O'Brien scene, like O'Brien, because I've always liked him. It's a very heavy O'Brien episode. I love Nog. I've been saying that for forever now, and it's great to see him get some more action in this, and I like how he was played this week. I do wish that maybe they just didn't kill everybody off, but again, that's the idea in a slasher movie. It would have been maybe a little more suspense. The Cardassians weren't really as scary as we thought they were, but ultimately it's the one we had to worry about was Garrick, and I think they kind of did show that. But I don't know, overall, after discussing this and getting into it a little more in depth, I think I'll just give this a middle of the road score, and I will give this 3.0 psychotropic drugs.
Well, as for the weaknesses of this episode, like I said, I can't really argue any points, and you guys are completely valid in bringing them up. I guess it's just because I like this genre and I like these kind of stories that I'm able to look past it. I mean, Matt, you've seen some slashers, but you're not like, you don't dig them like I do, or I've seen like some of the best and worst of the worst. So
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I appreciate the really good ones, but I know you're going to have a tremendous soft spot for this, and I can't, blame you for it. This is right in your wheelhouse.
Is that as shorthand as some of these explanations and some of the ways this turned out is, I guess because I was into the vibe of what they were trying to do with this episode, that I was like, okay, this isn't the most egregious thing I've ever seen in a slasher story. I mean, once I've seen stuff like, Myers is doing what he's doing is because he has the curse of the cult of Thorn. I mean, not much more can make me that much more incredulous or upset. So yeah, it's a bit kind of 90s horror on TV, which, I mean, unless you're Buffy or the X-Files, really wasn't really happening. But I don't know. If you want to call this a guilty pleasure, if you think this is a bad episode, that's fine. I don't think it's a bad episode, but I realize that it's right in my wheelhouse. So, I mean, you could take that with a grain of salt if you want when it comes to this rating. But I recognize the flaws, but I still like watching this episode, especially around this time of year. So I'm going to give it just a solid 4. Enjoyment of it.
Hey, you know what, Matt? I don't disagree with guilty pleasures. We all have them. And anytime you can, we all get something out of Star Trek. And this is, hey, no one's going to fault you for that 4. And when we get to the Valiant, and I give my 5-star episode, you just remember this conversation that I validate your 4. Good for you.
Plus, I mean,
I don't know what's a bigger ask. Them asking us to forgive Garrick in this episode, or you asking Matt to remember that and stand by it at Valiant.
Well, I'll certainly remember it. I don't know if I'll stand by it. I'll just say that, if you're going to call this episode a guilty pleasure, I think there are worse episodes to call guilty pleasures. We'll come to a couple of them next season for me.
Agreed.
All right. Well, why don't we wrap this episode or our podcast up tonight? And Matt, why don't you talk about how people can get a hold of us?
Well, sure. People can get a hold of us in a number of different ways. You can email us at up2podcast@gmail.com. Leave a comment on our forums at forum.trekmatefamily.com. Follow us on Twitter. That's the right word. Follow us on Twitter at UP2 Podcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. Also, thank you in advance for any 5-star iTunes reviews that you can leave about the show. It gets the word out there. We're about to enter the last 2 seasons of DS9. It's some exciting times. Lots is going to be happening, so we really appreciate that you like the show and you let us know about it. Thank you so much. You can also reach all of us individually on Twitter. I am at mhansen0207, HANSEN, where when I'm not being buried under a mountain of law school work, I talk about all things Star Trek, sci-fi, Marvel. I'll be talking a lot about the new Thor movie coming out in a couple of weeks. So find me there and we can talk about anything you'd like.
And I can be found at ProSub0 when I'm not being buried under a pile of experiments. I'll talk about sports. I read a lot of science fiction, vintage science fiction. And I do like to talk about Star Trek Discovery now quite a bit.
And I can be found at Medic1849, where when I'm not buried under constantly working and getting tons of overtime, I can usually be found either retweeting things or liking things to do with hockey, soccer, and some Star Trek Discovery stuff as well. And a fantastic episode tonight, which by the time you're hearing this would have been 2 weeks ago now.
And thank you so much for joining us tonight for this discussion on Empok Nor. Join us next week for an episode that I really don't remember how I feel about. I just know that it sets up some important stuff for the season finale, but we'll tackle all that plus baseball cards plus the soulless minions of orthodoxy or whatever they're called when we talk about In the Cards.
Did we want to do anything about form feedback before we wrap up?
No, we could just like insert it where before we did the how to get a hold of us.
Okay. All right. So just take a quick second here, and then I'll close it out. This is Blair from Ontario, Canada. Until next time.
I'm Matt in Buffalo, and let's go kick this MFer's ass all over Dreamland.
And this is Matt from Arizona saying, it, as a matter of fact, it was the boogeyman. And closing hailing frequencies. Docking clamps are open and you are clear for departure.